church is very important to Austin and I. It was a big part of our life and should still be, because Austin is supposed to be going to church and all his church functions. However, he is not, because the ministry seems to think they have the right to take God away from my child too. So, a kid who used to randomly talk to God throughout the day as he's playing is now being stripped of his religious freedoms. But the ministry doesn't care, because they've just done everything illegal possible to my child. They pulled him from his Christian school and then tried to state that he was actually never enrolled in school. Like, are you freaking kidding me? You can't do your homework to make one phone call and find out what school my child is in? You were even given my son's teacher's phone number for him to speak to her. But the ministry did absolutely nothing to maintain any of my son's relationships with anybody. Yet they forced him to meet monsters whom he did not want to meet, and his sperm donor who he did not want to meet. So I don't understand why you're causing my child the trauma of meeting strangers who he knew were bad people and forcing him to live with these monsters, yet you refuse to do anything to keep him connected to his family and friends, none of whom were ever asked if they could even take Austin while this mess was sorted out, because there were gladly many people who would have taken Austin. Instead, he's held hostage from everybody he loves because the ministry fucked up and they don't want to admit that they fucked anything up. That's why Jennifer Donnelly refuses to even acknowledge my existence or have ever asked me for the truth or ever spoken to our family and friends to find out the truth about Austin's life. No, she just bases everything off the word of Alice Sellers, the Wicked Witch of West Vancouver, who never knew my child, didn't know anything about him except for what she wanted to make up. Same thing about me. I never told her one thing about my life, and she couldn't stand that. So she just makes everything up to go along with the story she wants to tell, and her lies, her pathological lies, because she can't admit that she is a horrible, abusive monster. And so she just makes up stories about everybody else and how they're so screwed up and how it has nothing to do with her. My son has never been taken to church. He's not doing his daily Bible studies. He's not praying, not saying grace. He's living in an environment that is completely against our religious beliefs and all of our customs and traditions and lifestyles. And this is all completely illegal. This is, supposed to be well known, considering what they did to all the Native children when they stripped them of every single ounce of their being and threw them with the rich white people, which is exactly what's happened to my child. He's had every single ounce of him stolen. He's not allowed to go to his Christian school. He's not allowed to go to church. He's not allowed to pray. He's not allowed to do his Bible studies. He's not allowed to be involved with anybody he's ever known in his entire life. He's not allowed to have 1 ounce of his life remain the same, which is trauma. They've never asked one thing about my child, about what works best for him. They've never asked anything about his life. They never even asked if he had allergies. They just stole him and did what they wanted, and that was it. And nobody's seen or heard from my child since. Once I was told that, Austin was taken to Mass for Christmas, which is complete bullshit, because first of all, that's a lie. Nobody would take my child to Mass. And second of all, we're not Catholic, and no child wants to go sit in a boring Mass. There's no way that my child sat through a boring Mass when he has no desire to be in that kind of environment. And that's not our religion. Nobody's even asked what kind of church we go to. And that's a big thing these days. People being able to have their religious freedom. And people choose what church works closest to them. And then they still teach their children aside from the church. Because it's probably very rare that you find a church that teaches everything exactly the same way you believe. And that's exactly how I was with my son. If there's something being said in church that I don't quite agree with, then I have that conversation with my child and explain why. And I do it in a manner that is not forcing my child to believe what I believe, but trying to give him all sides of the perspective so he can decide what he thinks is right and wrong, and so that he will know that when he wants to grow up and make decisions on his own, that I'm going to respect those decisions and be supportive of them, whatever they are, whatever kind of lifestyle he chooses. If he chooses to be Muslim, if he chooses to be gay, if he chooses to do whatever. I started from our first conversations even speaking about marriage. We're never forcing my child to believe he had to marry a girl. It was always being open and saying things like, who do you think you want to marry? Or do you, like, just explaining to him that he can marry whoever he wants and do whatever he wants. Because I never wanted to be one of those stupid parents who forces everything down their child's throat and then is blindsided by the fact that their child is the complete opposite of what they forced on them. And then their child has to hide it from them because they feel like they're not going to be accepted, they're going to be hated. And I never wanted my kid to ever believe I would ever hate him for any reason. And now my child is being taught that I do hate him and that I don't want him, which is a complete lie. My child is living in the worst possible hell on earth that there is. And everybody just ignores it because nobody wants to admit that they fucked up. They just keep taking their payoffs and their paychecks and keep my child in danger. Not only was he illegally pulled from his Christian homeschool, but he was illegally enrolled in 2 schools at the same time. The ministry is supposed to know what the fuck they're doing. Then why would you have a child illegally enrolled in 2 schools at once and then lie and say my child was never enrolled in a school at all by me? They just twist everything into how they want it to be so that they can make me sound like the bad guy. Just like they pretend that they want to do things the right way when they reunite Austin and I. But then they turn around and leave every meeting and don't follow through with anything. Well, how did you do things the right way when you traumatized my child and ransacked my house and stole him from me? How was that the right way when I was cooperating and I could have done it in a nice manner instead of traumatizing my child the way you did? How is it the right way to force my child to go with monsters whom he said he did not want to go with because he's afraid of the bad people who hurt his mom? And you monsters lied to him and told him that's not true and forced him to go with the monsters. You monsters lied to him and traumatized him and forced him to meet his sperm donor when he didn't want to know anything about that monster. How was that the right way? And then you can't let him see or speak to any of his friends or family because you want to pretend it has to all be done in the right way? Really? It could have been done in the right way from the beginning, but you people all fucked up and didn't do anything the right way. All you keep doing is piling on the trauma to my child. Trauma after trauma after trauma. Just like you forced him to be with a dog, and then you create your own story trying to make my child sound like a monster. As if he's a serial killer who's starting off with hurting animals. Did you ever think to ask one thing about my child, if he even likes dogs or if it's safe for him to be around dogs, if he feels safe around a dog? No, he doesn't, because he's watched dogs eat his baby bunnies. And he doesn't want to be around dogs. But you force that trauma on him too, and then you make him sound like the monster when he has to defend himself. Because you fucked up ministry assholes just twist everything into how you want it to sound. So instead of admitting that you fucked up and you put my child with a dog when he shouldn't have been, making him uncomfortable and feel unsafe, then you turn him into the bad guy and the monster so that you don't have to admit that you're an asshole. Just like everything else in his life. You won't admit that you're the assholes who fucked up and traumatized him. No, you keep making me the bad